So now let's look at proportionality in a conceptual kind of way on a diagram like this. So let's consider that we've got two axes on our chart, and the horizontal axis is the nature, scale, and complexity of the risk of supervisory objectives having a problem. So the further we go out on that scale, the more likely it is that these objectives are at risk. And the vertical scale is the intensity of our regulation and supervisory response. So that means that a proportionate response is going to be along this line in the middle. As the nature, scale, and complexity gets bigger, then the intensity of supervision gets bigger, and vice versa. So that's our proportionate requirement line on this chart. Now let's consider an insurance company that's here at point A, company A. So the nature, scale, and complexity of the risk of that company and the supervisory response that we have to that would be proportionate. Now let's consider company B, which is sitting in a different place altogether. The nature, scale, and complexity of risk for that company is much higher, and the proportionate, even though our regulation and supervision is a little more intensive, it's still not sufficient for that risk. So what needs to happen? Well, one possibility is that we can increase the supervisory intensity to bring it into a more proportionate approach. This would not be a disproportionate increase because the risk justifies that. Second possibility is that the company could actually reduce its risk more in line with the supervision, and that could be something that is required by the supervisor. It brings the level of supervision back into proportion with the risk by reducing the risk of the company. So these are the two possibilities that could take place. A third company, for example, company C, has a lower risk but is sitting well up there in terms of intensity of supervision. That suggests that the supervisory interventions for that company are quite disproportionate. And in fact, the better solution is to reduce our supervisory intensity, commensurate with the risk back to the proportionate level. Alternatively, if the company retained that level of supervision, it might be incentivized to move its risk profile way out on the scale. At that point, it would be proportionate, but it's not totally clear whether we would want to force them to do that by saying we're just not going to reduce the burden of our regulation and supervision from a disproportionate level.